A single jet, a split-second decision, and the world came closer to a confrontation no one can afford. When Russia challenged a NATO aircraft, it wasn't just another military encounter, it was a move that sent shockwaves through global security. In today's high-tension airspace, one wrong maneuver can change history. Russia's decision to challenge a NATO jet wasn't a show of strength, it was a calculated risk that may have exposed serious strategic flaws. In this breakdown, we'll uncover what really happened and why this moment could mark a dangerous turning point that neither side can ignore. The encounter began like many others that have quietly unfolded in contested airspace over the past decade, with radar contacts, monitoring stations, and fighter jets scrambling to identify one another. But this time, the stakes were higher, the margin for error thinner, and the consequences far more serious. When a Russian military aircraft moved aggressively to challenge a NATO jet operating in international airspace, it transformed a routine patrol into a moment of global concern. NATO aircraft regularly conduct reconnaissance and patrol missions near Eastern Europe, the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, and the Arctic. These missions are legal, transparent, and defensive in nature, designed to monitor military activity and reassure allied nations. Russia, however, views these flights as provocative, especially amid heightened tensions following ongoing conflicts and expanded NATO presence near its borders. This clash of perspectives sets the stage for dangerous encounters. On this occasion, Russian fighters were scrambled to intercept a NATO jet that was flying in international airspace but close to Russian-controlled regions. Interceptions themselves are not unusual, they are standard practice among major powers. What raised alarm was how the interception was carried out. Russian aircraft reportedly approached at high speed, closed the distance rapidly, and maneuvered in a way that significantly reduced reaction time for both pilots. Such actions increase the risk of collision, misinterpretation, or accidental escalation. In modern aerial encounters, seconds matter. Fighter jets travel at hundreds of miles per hour, and even small miscalculations can lead to disaster. NATO pilots are trained to maintain distance, follow strict rules of engagement, and avoid aggressive signaling. When those norms are ignored, the situation can spiral out of control before political leaders even have time to respond. The immediate concern was safety. Near-miss incidents in the past, including cases where aircraft passed within mere meters of each other, demonstrate how close these encounters can come to catastrophe. A collision between military jets would not only result in loss of life but could trigger a chain reaction of retaliatory actions, each side blaming the other and feeling compelled to respond. Beyond the physical danger, the encounter carried symbolic weight. Airspace confrontations are often used as tools of signaling, a way to project strength, test responses, and send political messages without firing a shot. By challenging a NATO jet so aggressively, Russia appeared to be signaling defiance and a willingness to push boundaries. However, such signals can easily be misread, especially in an environment already clouded by mistrust. From NATO's perspective, the incident reinforced concerns about Russian military behavior becoming increasingly unpredictable. Alliance officials have long warned that unsafe intercepts raise the risk of unintended escalation. Unlike during the Cold War, when communication channels and established protocols helped manage close encounters, today's geopolitical environment is more fragmented, with fewer safeguards and higher levels of suspicion. The diplomatic fallout began almost immediately. NATO commanders publicly reaffirmed the alliance's commitment to continue operations in international airspace, emphasizing that intimidation would not deter lawful missions. Behind the scenes, military and diplomatic channels worked to assess the situation, share intelligence among allies, and determine whether the incident was a localized decision or part of a broader strategic directive from Moscow. For Russia, the challenge served domestic and international purposes. Domestically, it reinforced a narrative of resisting Western pressure and defending national interests. Internationally, it tested NATO's resolve, probing how far the alliance would go to protect its freedom of movement. But such tests come with serious risks. Unlike isolated encounters, this incident occurred against the backdrop of ongoing conflicts, sanctions, and military buildups, amplifying its significance. What makes this incident particularly dangerous is not what happened, but what could have happened. A pilot misjudging speed, a system's malfunction, or a momentary loss of situational awareness could have turned a show of force into a tragedy. In that scenario, leaders on both sides would be forced to react under intense public pressure, with incomplete information and little room for restraint. Ultimately, this encounter was a stark reminder of how fragile stability has become in contested regions. It demonstrated that while military power can project strength, it can also expose vulnerability, especially when aggressive actions replace measured strategy. The skies may appear vast, but in today's geopolitical climate, they are more crowded and dangerous than ever. At first glance, Russia's aggressive challenge to a NATO jet may have appeared to be a demonstration of strength, a signal that Moscow is willing to confront the alliance directly and defend what it sees as its strategic space. But beneath that surface show of force lies a series of miscalculations that make the incident a strategic mistake rather than a victory. Militarily, politically, and diplomatically, the risks far outweigh any short-term gains. From a military standpoint, confronting a NATO aircraft is not the same as challenging a single nation. NATO operates as a collective defense alliance, meaning any incident involving one member carries implications for all. By escalating an aerial encounter, Russia was not pressuring a lone adversary but provoking a bloc with vastly superior combined air power, intelligence capabilities, and logistical depth. NATO's integrated radar systems, early warning networks, and multinational command structure ensure that every aggressive move is immediately observed, analyzed, and shared across capitals. This imbalance is critical. While Russia maintains a formidable air force, it cannot match NATO's collective strength in a prolonged or escalated confrontation. Aggressive intercepts may look bold, but they also expose Russian pilots and aircraft to constant monitoring and potential countermeasures. In effect, the incident gave NATO valuable insight into Russian tactics, response times, and operational behavior, intelligence that can be studied and adapted against in future encounters. Another major flaw lies in the risk of miscalculation. Military strategy depends not only on strength but on control. When aircraft maneuver at close range and high speed, control is reduced and chance plays a larger role. A single accident, even one without hostile intent, could force political leaders into escalation they never planned. By choosing intimidation over restraint, Russia increased the likelihood of an uncontrollable outcome, undermining its own strategic stability. Politically, the incident backfired by reinforcing NATO unity. One of Moscow's long-standing strategic goals has been to exploit divisions within the alliance, disagreements over defense spending, threat perception, and regional priorities. However, unsafe and aggressive behavior has the opposite effect. When NATO aircraft are challenged, alliance members rally around the principle of collective defense. Even nations that prefer cautious engagement are compelled to support stronger deterrence measures when confronted with overt military pressure. Rather than weakening NATO's resolve, the incident strengthened arguments for expanded patrols, increased air policing missions, and greater military readiness along NATO's eastern flank. In practical terms, this means more NATO aircraft in the air, more surveillance near Russian borders, and more allied forces training together, precisely the outcome Russia claims to oppose. Diplomatically, the challenge damaged Russia's position on the global stage. While Moscow often frames NATO activity as provocative, international law is clear on the issue of freedom of navigation and overflight in international airspace. By acting aggressively where NATO aircraft were operating legally, Russia appeared as the destabilizing actor, not the defender. This perception matters, especially among neutral or non-aligned countries that carefully observe great power behavior. Such incidents also complicate any future diplomatic engagement. Trust, already in short supply, erodes further when military encounters appear reckless. Even routine confidence-building measures, such as communication outlines or deconfliction agreements, become harder to sustain when one side demonstrates a willingness to disregard safety norms. Over time, this increases isolation and limits diplomatic flexibility, leaving military pressure as one of the few remaining tools, a dangerous trajectory for any major power. There is also a domestic strategic cost. While aggressive encounters may generate short-term nationalist support, they lock leadership into a confrontational posture that becomes difficult to reverse without appearing weak. This narrows policy options and increases reliance on military signaling rather than long-term strategic planning. In the long run, such rigidity can be more damaging than external pressure. Perhaps the most critical mistake, however, lies in escalation dynamics. NATO doctrine emphasized deterrence through predictability, readiness, and restraint. Russia's action disrupted that balance by introducing unpredictability into an already volatile environment. When unpredictability increases, so does the chance of worst-case assumptions on all sides. NATO planners must then prepare for more aggressive scenarios, leading to heightened alert levels and faster response postures, conditions where mistakes are more likely. In strategic terms, true strength lies in shaping the environment to your advantage. This incident did the opposite for Russia. It justified NATO's warnings, validated calls for increased defense spending, and reinforced the narrative that Russia is willing to gamble with regional stability. Instead of deterring NATO, the challenge encouraged deeper alliance coordination and stronger deterrence measures. Ultimately, the encounter revealed a fundamental contradiction. Russia sought to project control and dominance, yet its actions exposed vulnerability, dependence on risky maneuvers, limited strategic alternatives, and an inability to de-escalate without losing face. In that sense, the challenge was not a calculated masterstroke, but a costly error that made the strategic landscape more hostile and less predictable for everyone involved.